early Thursday. Ivan, packing winds of up to 140 miles an hour, is expected to weaken as it makes a more northerly course. But coastal residents along the Gulf of Mexico are taking no chances. They're beginning to evacuate right now. More than 1 million people have been asked to leave areas in and around New Orleans alone. Joining us now from Raleigh, North Carolina, with his latest Ivan projections is Tom Paylor, business meteorologist for Weather Predict. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we got a long stretch here of people who are quite nervous and, battening down the hatches and getting in the car and getting out of town. What do we know about where this is going to hit, and when will we know more precisely?
You know, if you had to pick a worst-case point at this point, I'd probably pick the Mobile Bay area. That looks like the highest likelihood of a landfall. But the important thing with Ivan is that the hurricane-force winds extend about 100 miles outside of the center. So even if the landfall would be at Mobile Bay, you're still talking hurricane-force winds over toward New Orleans, and also points well to the east of Mobile. So it is a very wide swath of damage that will be upcoming for the Gulf Coast. Go ahead.
I want to talk about what some of the damage that we might be looking at. I mean, we've already got this storm churning through the Gulf. That's going to be damaging, I assume, to some of these offshore rigs. They're built to withstand some sort of hurricane-force winds, but do we think that they can withstand all of this?
You know, the newer rigs are built to withstand a storm on the strength of Ivan. Some of the older ones, though, are the ones that you really have to worry about sustaining some damage. You know, look at 1992, Hurricane Andrew moved through the same general region, and it did damage a lot of rigs back then. So a lot of the newer rigs, like I say, have been built to higher structural standards, but still with a 140-mile-an-hour storm with the winds over such a very broad area, there's certainly going to be at least some damage to those rigs out there.
What are you advising some of these energy companies that you talk to about, you know, what they should be doing here to either upgrade after this, or how long they might be out of service once the storm actually even passes?
You know, we don't really talk to energy companies as far as, you know, planning on designing the rigs and that kind of thing. Where we do give them an advantage is days in advance. Well before the storm reached the Gulf of Mexico, we were already advising our clients that it did look like the eastern Gulf of Mexico was definitely in play with this storm. So that's what we specialize in, giving energy traders an advance warning on where storms may go well before they actually do go there.
Another place where people really like to know what's happening, the commodity markets. Weather is so important to so many different commodity markets. In Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, you got crops, soybean crops in particular, other kinds of crops there as well. What's the situation for the crops in particular?
Well, you know, I think once the storm does make landfall, there is going to be damaging winds, you know, within 100 miles of the coast or so. If it does make landfall, it's a Category 3 or 4. One thing it does look like now, the storm is not going to move that fast, like racing up the eastern seaboard. It is going to take its time moving through the deep south, and there's going to be some very heavy rainfall amounts. We're talking many locations in Mississippi, Alabama, perhaps even Georgia up into the Carolina mountains, receiving more than 10 inches of rain. So I think the rain is going to be the very big story once this thing does get inland.
Let's talk about 3 major storms in 6 weeks' time, 6 or 7 weeks' time, and just taken together, the impact of this on the region.
Well, you know, you mentioned Office Depot earlier in the show, and that's certainly one industry that's been impacted is the retail industry. You also have the airlines that are impacted. You have tourism that's greatly impacted, and you just have the everyday business people that are having to take up and move themselves hundreds of miles from their homes once they are evacuated, and that certainly dents regional economies and even the national economy to a certain extent when you have so many disasters one after another. All
right, Tom Paylor, Weather Predict. Thanks so much for joining us, Tom.
Thank you.
Still ahead on Street Sweep, we take a look at the markets.